If your photos sometimes feel a bit off, the problem might be the colour, and getting it just right can be quite tough. So in today's video, I'll share some great techniques to help you improve colour in your photos. Plus, I have a hidden trick that can colour correct any photo with just a couple of clicks. So be sure to stick around for that because it's something I use a lot. Anyway, let's dive in. So a question that gets asked quite a lot on my photography workshops and tours is how I colour correct or colour grade my photos. So I thought it's something I would share with you today. Before we get on to some of the advanced editing techniques I'm going to be talking about, I just thought I'd share with you how I set up my camera to ensure I get the best colour when I'm out in the field shooting the images. So first and foremost, I would advise shooting in RAW. This is going to give you the most leeway when you get to the editing stage. And if you do shoot in RAW, you'll be able to completely change your white balance settings. Whereas if you've already got that color baked into a JPEG image, you've got a lot less wiggle room in post-production. So yeah, I'd always advise shooting in RAW for the best results. Secondly, there's a few ways of choosing how your camera's white balance is set up, such as leaving it in auto or choosing a preset such as cloudy or daylight. You can also set up a custom white balance setting if you've got a grey card, but this is more for, I think, studio work really. With this option, you can take a white balance reading from something like mid-tone grey, and the camera will measure the temperature of light reflecting off of the card and give you a neutral white balance setting based on those readings. But yeah, like I mentioned, if you're an outdoor photographer like me, this method isn't really ideal. There's also the option to select a Kelvin value. So if you're not familiar with the Kelvin scale, it's a way of measuring how warm or cool the light is. The higher the Kelvin value, the cooler the light temperature. I often select a Kelvin value when I'm shooting astrophotography. I just dial in the Kelvin value that looks right on the LCD for the scene that I'm shooting. Typically, when I'm outdoors during the day like we are today, I leave my white balance set to auto unless I'm taking a series of images. And this is quite important, so let me just quickly explain this. So if you're bracketing your photos for exposure, focus stacking or panoramas, then I would advise choosing a preset like cloudy or daylight, because it means that when you take a series of shots, the white balance will be the same for all of the photos. If you're trying to focus stack a series of images that have 2 or 3 different white balances, it's going to make post-processing really difficult. So yeah, it's always advisable to select a preset for blended images. Also, during the golden hour, it might be worth changing your white balance to say cloudy or shade, as this will give you a warmer tone in your photo. And if you've got your camera set to auto, the camera will try to give your image a more neutral looking shot, and it can hinder things like composition and will make your image look cooler than it actually is. So, you know, of course you can correct this in post-production if you've shot in RAW, that's not a problem, but I think it's always good to get a good representation of the scene that you're actually shooting in the field. It always feels a little bit more intentional, if you like. So this gives us the best possible chance of capturing the right colour when we're in the field, but there's a lot that we can do when we get back to post-production. So let's dive into a few techniques that I use all of the time to colour grade and colour correct my images. So I just want to start by talking about white balance here in Lightroom and how we can use it to correct or enhance our image. So here we are in Lightroom, and this is a nice coastal sunset shot that I captured at the beginning of the year actually. So I just want to talk a little bit about the white balance settings first. So obviously we've got the temperature slider at the top, so we can increase the warmth of the temperature or decrease the warmth of the temperature, make it cooler. It's pretty straightforward really. And the tint slider as well, if we take it to the right, it will take the hues more towards magenta. And if we take it to the left, it will take it more towards green. And a couple of other options that we have in the basics section are the vibrance and saturation as well. And we can increase or decrease these. So the vibrance is going to make the image, I think it really affects the midtones of the image more than anything else, and this really makes the image come to life. I'm a big fan of the vibrance slider, and saturation will affect the saturation of the whole of the image. So I tend to use vibrance a little more than I do in terms of saturation. I just feel vibrance targets the tones that I'm looking for a little better. Saturation you have to be a little bit more careful with, I think. So yeah, they're the sort of basic colour tools that we have here in Lightroom. We've got this picker as well, which you can use. So you can use this picker or selector and target a mid-grey area, and that will generate a white balance setting based on that. So if I clicked on that, it would create a white balance setting based off that area there, which doesn't often work that well for landscape photography because there's so many different colors within a shot. So yeah, they're the sort of basic tools that we can use. But when we're manipulating these colors here in the basics panel, we're manipulating the whole of the image. So if we warm the image up, we're warming up the shadows, the midtones and the highlights, the whole of the image. So essentially, we're creating a color cast, if you like, to the whole of the image, and that's something we might not want to do. So before we go any further, I just want to touch briefly on color theory. It's a massive topic, but anyway, I think understanding a few key principles here will help with the rest of the tools I'm going to be going over in just a second. Now, the first point is color separation, or using color to create depth in your photos. Now, when an image is dominated by one color, it can feel quite flat and it can lack depth as well. And this often happens when there is a color cast within your image, such as a wash of magenta or blue. Now, typically we see this color throughout the highlights, the midtones and the shadows, and quite often this is not ideal. Now, there's many ways to make an image feel more balanced, and color separation is definitely one of them. And I'll discuss how we can achieve this in a moment. But let's start with another useful point as well, and that is using complementary colors. Now, these are colors that sit opposite each other on the color wheel, such as red and green and blue and orange. And using complementary colors in your photos can create strong visual contrasts that make your subjects stand out. It can also simplify chaotic scenes, especially if there's only two colors present, which are both complementary colours. Now, this week's video is kindly sponsored by Milanote, and regular viewers might already know that I'm a huge fan. Now, I use Milanote on a daily basis to organise my projects, but another great way I use it is when I'm learning something new, like a new photography technique. Let me show you how I create my boards using some of the points I'm covering in today's video. For example, I've titled my board Colour Photography Tips and added a nice shot of the X-T5 as a visual reference point. Now, adding images is really easy. You can choose from stock photos, upload your own, or use the web clipper to grab an image from the web. Milanote is fantastic because it lets you collect photos, notes, videos and tasks and organise them in a way that makes sense. And as you can see, I've added notes and grouped them in columns to keep everything neat. I've also added arrows to highlight important points as well. Now, if you find an interesting article online, you can simply copy the link and paste it into your board, creating a live link back to that website. And I find this incredibly helpful, especially when I'm learning something new. Now, you can also create subboards within your main board, which is great to keep things organised. For example, this icon here is a subboard I've created on how to correct a colour cast. Let's take a look. This visual flow diagram shows how I corrected a magenta colour cast, and the colour correction image is a simple screen grab from my Lightroom workflow. I've also created a checklist which allows me to check things off as I work through a new workflow. Now, creating a new board is super easy. You just drag in the new board icon, name it, and choose from one of Milanote's amazing templates. Say we want to create a mood board, for example. Now, as you can see, we've got a ready-made board here to get started with. It really is that simple. Another feature I absolutely love is the ability to share a board with somebody else. Now, I can send this board to a friend, for example, so they can access all of the information that I've gathered. One of the best things about Milanote is how easy it is to use, and they've got over 100 built-in templates to get you started. Now, Milanote is available for free with no time limit, so if you want to be super organised and create amazing boards, check out the link in the video description to get started with Milanote. So if we want to be a little bit more selective about how we manipulate colour in the image, a good place to go is the colour mixer. And this allows us to manipulate certain colours. So we've got the hue, the saturation and the luminance of all these different colour channels that we can manipulate. And the easiest way of doing it is just by clicking on these little targets here, moving your pointer over to a colour that you'd like to manipulate, click on it and then either drag the mouse down to decrease the saturation or push the mouse up to increase the saturation. So that just targets the specific colours in those areas, and it's an absolutely brilliant way of manipulating certain colours. So if you just wanted to saturate more the blue tones, you can do that without affecting other colours. It's a brilliant tool to use. I use it all of the time, and you can also use it for manipulating the hue and luminance. So if I clicked on the luminance slider here, and I say I wanted to brighten these greens up, I could just literally select that area, push my mouse forward, and as you can see, those colours then get brighter in the image. So that's another great thing to do. It's a little bit more like selective dodging and burning. You can just target certain colours and increase the luminance values. And obviously we can change the colour with the hue as well. So if we wanted to take the reds more to orange, we could just do that by moving the red slider over to the right hand side, and that will take those reds further to orange. So we can manipulate colours a little bit as well. The point colour is another great tool which I use quite a lot, and that allows you to selectively manipulate colours, but it just gives you a little bit more control. So you can use the selector tool to select a colour, and that will make a swatch for you, and then we can manipulate the hue. See, that's taking it more cyan, this is taking it more magenta, but we can also manipulate the range as well, so we can increase the amount of tones within our range that we're selecting as well. So it just gives us a little bit more control. However, there's another way in which we can manipulate the colours in the image, but do it a lot more selectively, and that's with masks. So let's just quickly come up to the masking section, and I'll show you how we can create a mask and then just paint those adjustments in where we actually want them to be, which is a really valuable tool. This is, I would say, the way that I do it 90% of the time. So let's say we just want to change the blues in the sky up here. I'm going to press K on the keyboard, and that is going to bring my adjustment brush up. I'm just going to paint that area in quite roughly for now. And then I'm going to come down to my point color tool and then select blue. And then that's going to allow us to change the saturation, luminance and hue in that area. So let's see what we do there. We're increasing the saturation of that area. Now, say for example, I only want the very, very top corner to be very, very saturated and not this area down here. I can just select my negative brush by holding down Alt or Option on the keyboard, bring up my negative brush and then just paint that area away. See how I'm painting that area away now? Or if I've got my positive brush on, I can paint that area in. So you can see you can be a lot more selective with using point color as a mask than you can if you just use point color in the global editing section. So yeah, it's so much value in this tool here. You can really go to town on selective local adjustments with color. So I highly recommend using point color with an adjustment brush. It just allows you to paint on the adjustments where you need them to be, basically. So one of the biggest things with editing is color and how our eyes perceive the screen to look. And sometimes you're looking at an image and you're thinking to yourself, there's definitely something wrong with it, but I'm not 100% sure what. And quite often it's a color cast where the color is washing through all of the tones within the image. But sometimes it's really difficult to see that. And I've edited this image and I kind of got it 95% of the way there. It's one that I edited in the Photographer's Clubhouse quite recently. And yeah, I went away and come back, and then I noticed straight away there's a light magenta cast throughout this image. And I wanted to get rid of that. And I'm going to be taking a look at how you can color correct in just a second with this hidden tool in Photoshop. But first of all, I want to touch on color grading, because this is where we can separate colors a little bit. Now, when we're talking about adding color depth to an image, typically we'll see warmer highlights and cooler shadows. And this is the place to do it, the color grading section. So as you can see here, I've already done a little bit of color grading to this actual image. Now, as you can see, this wheel here is the shadows, this one here is the highlights, and this one here is the mid-tones. And what you can see here is I've added some warm tones to the highlights, and I've added some cool tones to the blues. If we just toggle off the color grading, you'll see what difference it's made to the image. See how that's making the image look a lot cooler, and when I turn it back on, when I turn those effects on, it is looking a lot warmer. So we've added color depth to the image, we've warmed the highlights, we've cooled the shadows. Now you can be as selective with this as you wish. I'll just show you how to use these. Basically, this one here, adjust the hue, so you can see how my highlights are going more towards green and then they're coming round more towards magenta. So let me just undo that. And then this one here controls the saturation, so we can see how much saturation we're putting into the image of that hue that we've just selected. So you can be really, really selective about where you're applying those tones too, or those colours too. And this is something I use a lot. You do have to be quite careful with how far you take it. And this image really needed some, the highlights really needed warming up. So that's why I went quite heavy on the highlights, but just quite subtle with the shadows. I just wanted to bring some blue tones into the shadows around the back here. But yeah, let's toggle those on and off again, just so you can see. So this is off. As you can see, the whole image is a lot cooler. Remember, this is a golden hour shot, so we really want to accentuate those golden tones. Turn it back on again, and the image is just brought to life. So yeah, the color grading tab is excellent for adding color separation. Next, I want to talk about this hidden tool in Photoshop that is so valuable. I use it all of the time when I'm struggling with an image and I don't really know what's wrong with it. Like this image, when I come back to it, I could see there was an issue. I took this image into Photoshop, used this little technique, and straight away I found out what the problem was. This is so valuable, honestly. Like, if this is the only piece you take away from this video, honestly, it's so good. So what we're going to do, we're going to take this image into Photoshop, but we're going to open it as a smart object. If we open it as a smart object, it's going to allow us to have information to the raw file that we've already edited. So all of these little adjustments we've made here in Lightroom, we'll be able to see in Adobe Camera Raw as well. So to do that, I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to come up to Edit In and Open as a Smart Layer in Photoshop. So we've identified that there is a problem with this image, and like I mentioned before, I think it's probably got a bit of a magenta hue to it, a bit of a cast, a bit of a wash of colour throughout the image that we might want to correct. So obviously we've got the smart object here in Photoshop. If I double click on this little box here, we'll be able to see it opens Adobe Camera Raw, and all of our settings that we've adjusted in Lightroom are here. They transfer over if you open a smart object. If I click on the mask section, you'll be able to see all the different masks that I use to get the image to this stage. So yeah, super valuable way of carrying your edit on if you do need to go in Photoshop. Let's cancel this and go back to our main editing. So to sort out this problem, there's a great little hidden technique, and we're going to select curves. So let's select a curves adjustment layer, and as you can see, that's opened a new adjustment layer on top of our original raw file. And this hasn't done anything to the image yet because we haven't made any adjustments to the curve. But you see this little section up here that says auto. If you hold down Option or Alt on your keyboard and click auto, it brings this auto color corrections option box up, which is completely hidden away. I don't know why it's so hidden because it's so amazing. But if you come up to Enhance Per Channel Contrast, click on that little button there, and then click on Snap Neutral Midtones, it will take the color cast out of your image for you. So if I click OK, now you can see, if you look at the curves, it's added some different sort of color channel manipulations or changes to the curves. And basically, if I toggle this on and off now, you'll be able to see the difference. So that's with it off, you can just see that slight magenta cast throughout the image. Turn it back on again, and you can see it's a lot more neutral looking. Now, this has corrected the whole of the image. Now, maybe we don't want to correct the whole of the image, do we? Perhaps we want those magenta hues washing through the sea mist, but we don't want them in the land here. We don't want those magenta hues in the rocks or the shadows on the left hand side. Well, simply what we can do is just paint those areas in using a layer mask. So we've already got a white layer mask selected. So if I select my brush on the keyboard, press B, and make sure I've got black paint selected, increase the brush size. I'm just going to do this roughly, but I'm just going to paint in that area, or should I say paint out that area, which is essentially that black paint now is revealing the layer below. So that is taking away those color corrections that were already made. So basically, we've got the original file up here, and we've got the color corrected file over here on the left hand side. So I've just done this very, very roughly just to demonstrate how you can do it, but it's such a powerful tool, and I highly recommend checking it out. It's saved me many a time when I've really been scratching my head trying to think about why the image kind of looks washed out, looks flat, or the colors just don't look right. 99% of the time, this will sort your problem out. So do go and check it out. If you have any tips on color theory or color science, please be sure to drop a comment down below. It'd be great to hear your thoughts as well. We always like to try and help each other out here and educate one another. So if you've got any tips, please be sure to drop them down there in the comment section. It'd be great to get a conversation started down there. By the way, if you're interested in improving your photography editing, you might like to check out my photography club, the Photographer's Clubhouse, where you'll find my Lightroom masterclass and my fortnightly editing sessions where you can download my raw files and follow along with the edits. It's an amazing space and the link for that is down in the description if you fancy checking it out. If you enjoyed this video, you might enjoy this one up here too. If you found this video useful, please be sure to give it a like and subscribe for more weekly content. Hope to see you all again next week.